Guys, welcome to another Sales Wisdom Pod. We have Skylar Lysaker with us. He is co-founder and VP at ISA Energy. We're going to talk about sales fusion, energy3. So we might want to start with that. Skylar, how did you get into energy? And yeah, tell us a bit more about fusion. You'd be the first guest I have to talk about that.
Yeah, certainly. So, the story goes back 7 or 8 years where my business partner and good friend Hunter, he had been inspired by one of his mentors to specifically get involved in a business that was bigger than himself. So he started to seek out things that were impactful beyond his current business dealings at the time. And he landed on clean energy because he was initially researching rockets and new ways to fly to space and getting into some really sci-fi stuff. But eventually, there needs to be a power source for something like that if we're going to get into the next level of space travel. So he landed on fusion, and around that time, I ended up meeting him. And from there, we built some businesses along the way. He continued to have a lot of passion for this, and we always felt that we end up getting to this point again where we'd actually be able to find the technology, we'd be able to have capital partners, we'd be able to have the experience and the bandwidth to get into this sector. So, a few years ago, we ended up propping ISA Industries up in January of 2020. And through years of research and diligence and meeting engineers and inventors, we found a gentleman in which had developed a nuclear fuel. So kind of like this drink in my cup, it was a fuel source that was able to produce an extremely efficient reaction. And that reaction specifically was a fusion reaction with his fuel source. So the base premise of how it works is that when you have the fuel source and you introduce an electrode into that fuel source and you run power into that electrode, what actually happens around the electrode is that you'll notice a column of plasma around it. And really what's happening in that is that the deuterium atoms in the fuel, they're fusing. It creates a tremendous amount of energy, which then turns into steam. You run it through a steam turbine, and you run it just like a traditional coal-fired plant. So our vision is to essentially take coal-fired plants and put a new fuel source in them so they can continue to generate power, put it on the grid. The difference here is that with fusion and with the way that we formulated it, it is a carbon neutral solution and is highly efficient, meaning that we can use a lot less power to put in than what comes out on the backside of it. So that's the key benefit. Basically, find new ways to power the world and do it in a way that's not too disruptive to traditional infrastructure.
Right. You and I share similar backgrounds. So I've had my moonshots on and off. You can notice some of them publicly available on my LinkedIn and so forth. You had greens that I see that is also related kind of to what you're doing right now that has some science in the mix. You started COO at FG Marketing, which I believe you also founded, right? So we kind of share that similar digital marketing agency background, and then you went into these other companies. What's your relationship with moonshots? Do you believe that there should be cash cow feeding these?
That's a great question. I don't really think there is any one way. It just depends upon your situation and network. So, when we started ISA, we didn't have the largest network to get in and start to meet capital partners. We had good connections with uh, local VCs and local angels and local high net worth individuals that were able to come in and help us fund the initial setup of the deal. But from there, it took us a long time to get to a position which we're finally just kind of getting to now, where we have the right contacts when it comes to grants or venture capital or bigger players in the game that can help take this thing to the next level. So I think if you want to keep more equity on your side and you want to, keep it as close to the chest as possible, then building a cash cow business is a great way to do that. So it's something that we've continued to pursue alongside building this because obviously the hard costs and the building of actual technology and hardware and manufacturing fuel and building things is a lot more expensive than a software or even your traditional startup business. So we, with it being such a high cost and risky play, regardless of what we feel we'd like, which at the end goal would be to just get funded and work on this all the way through. If we want to keep it close like we do, then we're going to continue to develop streams of income with our skill sets that we've learned over the years to keep things moving, and fund it ourselves.
Right. Because you seem to be bootstrapped, and I read one of your latest article that's called Carrying the Burden. If you want to tell us a bit more about that one, because necessarily when you try to strive for something that hasn't been achieved before, anything ambitious, you're gonna have to suffer, develop somewhat of a relationship with that pain. I wrote today that anytime you're in pain, the only way out, well, in constant pain, that is, in an ultra event like my ultra sim that I accomplished last Friday, 10 kilometers open swimming, or startups, for example, you can meditate your way out of it. So, what's your relationship with pain, and how do you make it manageable?
Hmm. I think I just know that pain is it's temporary, you know? So with that in mind and knowing that I believe that the path that we are on is not just about business at this point in time, and it's truly spiritual in nature as well for us. Some of the things that have occurred specifically, they have no logical rhyme or reason, but they bring people together in ways that they don't just add up, you know? So think for that, it's just also like it's a spiritual mission for us. So I think that said, regardless of some of the challenges we face, including the stuff we talked about, uh, I talked about in that last article, regardless of those things occurring, I am just extremely fired up about the impact that it can have on the world, not only from a technological standpoint, but also from an education standpoint. Because my point of view, this is just my opinion, you know, is that we've been slightly miseducated and slightly misinterpreted history to a degree in which that we don't know how to fully access our potential as human beings. And we're kind of stuck with certain levels of creativity that have us stuck in how we're able to participate in the world. So I think for me, having this mission be more than just, okay, we're trying to build technology and sell a company or get to a certain valuation marker. It's like this technology has to happen. And the reason why I'm even here doesn't make sense. It's not even about me. We're just following an intuition at this point. We're just following a path being shown to us. So it's more of like an exploratory journey. It's like an adventure, and I think that is the what brings joy in the process of also having to bear the weight and face pain.
Right. There's like fusion companies that are getting hundreds of millions of dollars as Series A. How is ISA gonna compete against or with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that's something that's very important to note in this industry is that of all the companies that have raised hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, nobody has working technology on the market. And barely anybody has working technology even in the lab. So I'm just confident because we have working technology in the lab and we have visual demonstrations available on the internet and are actually offering people to come see demos that the reality is that we have technology that's a little bit further along than these companies that are funded. And I don't mean to say that in an arrogant way. I just mean to say in a way that I've had nuclear physicists come to my lab and literally say it. It's not me saying that. It's, higher education people saying that to me. So with that said, I'm just confident that regardless of maybe the misunderstanding of our approach, and maybe regardless of the some of the things that have occurred that have caused us challenges on the legal side of things, that we'll be able to persevere. So with some of the partnerships we developed recently and some of the people we're talking to, I think we'll get to that point where we're able to raise a good amount of money and get this thing going and build a proof of concept in a timeline that to most people in the here would seem unrealistic. So
Right. Are you guys doing some in silico, aka like software testing before actually building the real thing, and like real beta slash prototype demonstration, but using a software? Is that what I'm understanding here?
no, not specifically. I mean, we already have our proof of concept and like benchtop demos working where we're actually producing energy and the plasmas aren't occurring. So everything that I explained at the start of this video has already happened, and we're already doing. So the next steps for us specifically, we're building a pilot project. So we're taking basically what would be known in the modern industry of small modular reactors, but essentially containerizing an SMR and putting that power source on site at our facility and powering our own building. So we could take that approach. We could drop it on somebody else's building and run power that way. But basically, first things first, just containerizing it and showing it power a usable item. So it could be a Tesla, it could be a building, it could be a pack of batteries. It's just showing that this approach does in fact work. And although it's unique, it has application and it can go to market quicker than most on the market.
Right. What would be the economics of the company? Are we talking about dollars per kilowatts? And then what would be the beta product, and who would be the current customers? You named Tesla, but who would be the end customers? Would it be B2C? Would it be B2B?
There's two paths we're taking. So uh, the easier path, easier on us and also just quicker, I'd call it lower hanging fruit, is licensing. So licensing the rights to produce our fuel, which is really the IP, and giving it to bigger companies that can also carry the burden and put it into the marketplace. That is a path that is very, very appealing to us because we have those contacts where we can take it to a larger oil or larger technology company that can utilize it. Secondarily, the other path is taking the containerized model that I was just talking about and bringing that right to fabs and data centers. So bringing it to companies that have high power requirements or power costs, like a chip manufacturer, and saying, hey, you can buy our power from us. We'll build a containerized product for you and it can power your facility. That and that approach is really, really key for data centers, like I said, and these fabs, because like in Arizona, for example, when you're bringing a lot of new business and these manufacturing facilities to town, they have very high power requirements. So it can put a burden upon the utilities, but also a burden on the people. It might change the way that we, how much it costs for power in the state. So I think just being able to help actual businesses create and generate their own power and kind of stay away from having to deal with the grid or the utility is another great approach that we've been highly considering and having conversations about.
My first question is, what do you think about the power pack vision of Elon and selling energy? And second, what will be the reaction of the markets when the government will not be able to provide their citizens? Well, they will be competing against private company. Is that already the case? Because I've studied Enron and these companies, not for the scam level of it, but just like for how energy works and how that publicly listed company worked. So tell us about these things.
Hmm. So in my conversations with local government authority, they basically say go right to the fabs, go right to the consumer. Because the way, like, for example, in Arizona, the way that regulation works is that the government, like, they have an entity that oversees the utilities, but the utilities in my state are basically a monopoly. There's a handful of them that essentially are a monopoly. Although they don't say that, that's really what it is. And they run the show, they produce the power, they've taken all the financial risk, and they want to do things the way that they want to. So as a person using the utility, which I deeply respect and adore, and I appreciate all that they've done as a company, I don't have very many options to either take myself off the grid or generate my own power because they want to either buy that power. And if they haven't approved the system in which I produce power to sell back to them, they also won't take it. So I think the problem in general is that it's just a really outdated model and it's going to cause problems when it comes to actually securing the grid in case of invasion or other problems that could happen with war. Like it's just not secure. You shut down one of the systems here in the United States, one of the interconnects, or you hit one wrong part of the grid, and we're talking about basically taking multiple states offline. So my vision and our vision really here at ESA is like, why would we not start to have systems that decentralize that, de-risk it, and produce power on a zip code to zip code basis, or produce power for a fab, or produce power even on a home level, so that in case of anything like that, attacks or strikes, instead of the whole grid going down and everybody's screwed, well, now you'd have to piece by piece take down each power source for each for each part of the system. It's just safer that way. So from a security risk, it's much smarter to take a decentralized route. But secondarily, there's just a lot. One thing we have to know is there's a lot of money and a lot of lobbying and a lot of things happening that basically limit the interaction between a private company like ours and a utility. So it's a very wide subject. There's a lot of ways it could go, a lot of paths I could take it. I just think it's important to note that we believe that there is a better way to do this thing and that we should at least have the opportunity. I believe in fair competition. I believe that consumers should have the opportunity to purchase power in new ways that's more cost effective and better for their lives. I don't think they should be basically gridlocked into buying power at certain rates and only having to deal with one utility. Why is it that we can choose all this food, which is a natural part of our lives? Why is it that we can choose any vehicle, but we can't choose our damn power? I don't know. So that's just something that I'm still learning. And from my time with politicians and talking to experts in this space, it's very regulated and it's very much a small circle. And the small circle has their own agenda and plans, and it really doesn't include anybody else but them. So I'll put it that way.
Right. Well, thank God that we have freedom of speech at least to discuss and think about these things and possibly change them. What about Elon's master plan? Do you think it's far-fetched? Because his master plans are always giving back the power to the people, aka giving them the money, right? Like, oh, I'll have my own Tesla taxi fleet and I'll make money while I'm at work, or I'll overproduce energy, I'll sell some. What do you think about these?
I think the business model is cool. I like where he's going with the idea of the model and freeing the people. I have a concern about just batteries in general. When I spend time with people that have been working in clean energy for a very long time, 2 decades plus, everybody that really knows that we're not going to solve the problem with batteries. We're not going to solve it with solar. We're not going to solve it with wind because they're intermittent. And batteries alone, I don't know if you've ever heard of Redwood Materials, but they're ex-Tesla employees that have rolled off into companies like Redwood Materials who are trying to solve the battery recycling problem because we're not going to have enough material to continue to make batteries at this rate to electrify everything. So when you look at the problem with batteries, they're a great band-aid and step in the right direction to get people thinking, but they're not really a holistic solution. I kind of view batteries like medication, like an ibuprofen. You have a headache, so pop an ibuprofen, it'll do the job, but what's really causing the headache? So what's really causing pollution right now? What's really causing our limitation? Well, I believe that there is a bunch of technologies better than batteries, solar, and wind, including stuff like fusion, that are out there in the market, but they cause a lot of disruption and they will put a lot of people at distrust with education systems and governments because it'll just invalidate a lot of the things that they think about life. So, and a lot of the things they think about how power works. If you understand that everything is energy and there are different ways to tap into energy through electromagnetics or different types of fuels or waters, then all the power that they have as a utility or as a government, all the deals they made for 100 plus years, that goes away, or it just comes up that they're lying. So what does that do for you as a citizen? It makes you not trust them. So I think in general, with new technologies like this, we've seen with crypto, is that it causes a lot of stir. So you just need to make sure that you understand that there is a lot to deal with on the come up of making new technology because it just causes controversy and causes people to be scared. So that's my overall 2 cents. I like the model, what Elon's doing. I think people should have the opportunity to sell power back to the utility, but also I think in general, most people should have the power for a cost-effective system to just power their house and reduce their costs as well. I think that's definitely an opportunity. So
Right.
that's
And
my 2 cents.
when it comes to regulation, how are you separating the responsibilities between you and your CEO? Like who will do what?
Yeah. So we work as a trifecta for the most part between Hunter, Jared, and myself. So we're the co-founders, along with a few other co-founders and a team of engineers and a bunch of advisors that have helped us in many, many very good and helpful ways. So for us, we kind of work in this structure, and maybe you've heard of this formula, maybe you haven't, but we're like the balloon string in the hand. So Hunter, our CEO, is really the visionary. He's thinking 50,000 feet in the air about the vision, where we're going, all that stuff. I myself, I'm like the string. I basically communicate and make sure that messages and ideas can actually reach down to the ground, which is the hand. And that would be Jared, who's more of a lean operator. So the way that the three of us work is we all have a different capacity of thinking about how things need to get done, and we all understand our unique characteristics and skill sets, and we basically fill each other's gaps. So what the way that we operate, obviously we're all under the same vision. All of our decisions run through the three of us. No big decisions are made without that approval. But what's really important is that we understand our weaknesses and we find people to fill the gaps really quick. So if anything like that we've learned over the past few years is find people smarter than us and get them involved to also go find more people smarter than them, and rinse and repeat. So I think that's where we're very potent, is that not only do we fill each other's gaps, but secondarily, we've literally been through some of the most challenging situations that we could go through together and have held each other's back the entire time and have made it through them. So I think for us, like, we become not just business partners, but we're like brothers. So we do anything for one another, which I don't think most businesses have that in-depth camaraderie. If you're at a big public company, you're like, I make my money, I do my thing, I go home, I have my vested interests. For us, it's like we're also very good friends. So the way that we think about and the way we participate in our business is very close, but very protective. And also it's 30 years ahead. We're not like what's next week or what's next year all the time. It's like, what do we need to do over the next few weeks, years, months to get to this end game, which could be 10, 20, 30 years ahead.
Interesting. Last but not least, how would you change the current bureaucracy and possibly provide a better alternative to lobbying when it comes to political surface and general level changes?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, yeah, I don't see any of that stuff changing soon. I really don't. I don't think that I'm going to be the one to solve that problem. I sure hope an entrepreneur does solve that problem. I think it's a really big problem and admirable to solve, and that the right person will at the right time. In regards to what I wish could change, I just simply wish that this doesn't even have to do with politics anymore. This has to do about human nature. I just would pray for a time in the future that humans that are adults, that are not kids, act like fully mature grown adults and live honest, integrity driven lives. Because the problem with lobbying and the problem with these systems is not the system or the lobbying itself. It's the fact that people are easily swayed by money and greed. So if they don't have their morals and their ethics screwed on correctly, or their value systems out of whack, they'll just do things that end up hurting people and limiting competition. So I fear, specifically in America, is that we're moving in a direction where, like, yeah, we do have a free capitalistic marketplace, but it's more or less getting suctioned down into like a marketplace that's not really free, but also still capitalistic, which doesn't really work at the end of the day. If we want to drive competition and creativity and give opportunity for people to be there at their highest potential, we need many different businesses. We need many to fail. We need many to succeed, and we need to leave the opportunity open. So when it comes to creativity and technology, if it's extremely challenging for a technology with a disruptive nature to come into the market, either being that the way that capital works doesn't favor them, or if the political system, it doesn't favor them, or if there's a monopoly in that industry, well, then it's going to be really hard to get to market. And I only say that because I've literally lived that. We have everything against us when it comes to infrastructure. We do have some great blessings as well in regards to like the opportunities at hand, but there's just it just doesn't make sense. I mean, if I'm gonna be really cut and dry, it's just super illogical. And anybody that tries to validate it, I still haven't had anybody tell me how it makes sense. I think it's just we're so used to it that we think this is normal, and I have a hard time believing things are normal when they've just been adhered. Once we adhere to it, we think it's normal. That's not really thought through. I just think most people aren't critical thinkers and they aren't asking these questions. They aren't considering these things. They're just so distracted. So once you start to clear the air of your mind a bit and you really spend some appropriate time looking upon political systems, bureaucratic systems, and all this stuff, you just see it for what it is. And it's scary. It makes you uncomfortable. So if people aren't prepared for that uncomfort, they'll just revert back to my old ways, put that back in the corner of my mind. We'll just live our life. We'll make our money. I have my kids. maybe not. This thing will fall apart. I don't know, but I don't want to deal with it. I think most people are in that place where they just don't want to deal with it. I am willing to deal with it. I personally like that thrill. I like the challenge. So that's what's exciting to me.
Love it, man. Yeah, I could never really figure my head around the whole VC model, although it does adhere to general capitalistic rules and lobbying. Yeah, that's certainly, it's kind of an easy one. I don't think it's most people disagree on the fact that, yeah, it's somewhat like acceptable corruption kind of. And yeah, you just need to be careful when you're kind of not giving the opportunity to the lower strata anymore. I do believe it's important that we give younger gens the opportunity to compete. I also think that VC is kind of widening that in its kind of modern slavery. It will be seen as such in some time. So not sure how long it will last, but anyway, I'm still wrapping my mind around all of that. I think you dropped like huge value today. So thank you for that, Skylar. Where can people find out more about you and about ISA?
Yeah. Best place to find me personally is on LinkedIn. So Skylar Lysaker, only one of me on earth as far as I know it. And yeah. And then from there, you can stay up to date with our company. I do a lot of stuff on our company through my profile. You'll be able to find our LinkedIn as well as our website through there. So LinkedIn is the way to all things ISA.